What if I told you that one of the most influential leaders in American history was born into slavery, didn't know his own birthday, didn't even have a last name, and yet rose to dine with presidents, build institutions, and inspire millions? This is not a fairy tale. This is not fiction. This is the true story of Booker T. Washington, and his journey from the darkness of bondage to the light of freedom will transform how you see your own challenges, your own obstacles, and your own potential for greatness. If you've ever felt trapped by your circumstances, if you've ever wondered whether hard work really matters, if you've ever doubted that you could rise above where you started, then this story was written for you. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear will change your life. Welcome to Audiobook Gist. Today, we're diving deep into one of the most powerful autobiographies ever written. This is the story of a man who transformed himself, transformed thousands of others, and left a legacy that continues to this day. Picture this: a small cabin on a Virginia plantation in the years before the Civil War. Inside that cabin, a young boy sleeps on a dirt floor. He has no bed, he has no shoes, he has no formal education. He doesn't know his father. He barely knows any life beyond hard labor. That boy is Booker, and he doesn't yet have the name Washington. He doesn't yet know what he will become. All he knows is the reality of slavery, the reality of being considered property, the reality of a life with no apparent future. But here's what makes this story extraordinary. That boy on the dirt floor would one day stand before audiences of thousands. He would advise presidents. He would build one of the most important educational institutions in America. He would prove, through his own life, that no beginning is too humble, no obstacle too great, and no dream too large. The earliest memories of childhood are often the sweetest, filled with warmth and comfort and love. But for Booker, his earliest memories were of confusion and hardship. He was born into slavery on a plantation in Franklin County, Virginia, sometime around 1856. The exact date of his birth was never recorded because enslaved people were not considered important enough to have their birthdays documented. This simple fact tells you everything you need to know about the world he was born into. A world that didn't see him as fully human. His mother was a cook on the plantation, working endless hours to feed others while her own children often went hungry. There was no father figure in his daily life. The cabin where he lived with his mother and siblings was small, cramped, and had openings in the walls where the cold wind would blow through during winter months. The floor was bare earth. There was no glass in the windows, just openings that let in whatever weather came. But even in these conditions, something remarkable was happening inside young Booker's mind. He was observing, he was thinking, he was dreaming. Even as a small child, he noticed things. He noticed how the white children on the plantation went to school while he worked. He noticed how books seemed to hold some kind of magic that was kept from him. He noticed how knowledge seemed to be the dividing line between those who controlled their lives and those who did not. One day, while carrying books for one of the white children to the schoolhouse door, something happened that would shape his entire life. He looked through the doorway and saw children sitting at desks, learning to read, learning to write, learning to think. In that moment, a fire was lit inside him. He didn't just want to be free, he wanted to be educated. He understood even then that true freedom meant having the knowledge and skills to build your own life. Remember this. He was still enslaved. He had no right to education. In many places, it was actually illegal to teach enslaved people to read. The system was designed to keep him ignorant, to keep him dependent, to keep him believing that his place was at the bottom. But the system couldn't control his mind. The system couldn't extinguish his desire. The system couldn't stop him from dreaming. The work on the plantation was constant and demanding. Young Booker carried water to the field workers. He cleaned the yards. He operated the fans that kept flies away from the dining table during meals. Every task was performed under the watchful eye of overseers who could punish any failure. There was no time for childhood play. There was no space for imagination. There was only work and more work. But even in this grinding routine, moments of inspiration found their way in. Booker would later recall how his mother would sometimes wake him in the middle of the night to share a stolen sweet potato. In those quiet moments, when the world was asleep and it was just mother and child, there was love. There was tenderness. There was a bond that slavery could not break. His mother's love planted seeds of self-worth that would grow into something unstoppable. Then came the moment that changed everything. The Civil War ended, and with it, the institution of slavery. Booker was approximately 9 years old when freedom came. A stranger came to the plantation and read a paper to all the enslaved people gathered in the yard. That paper declared them free. Imagine being told, for the first time in your life, that you belong to yourself. Imagine the joy and the terror of that moment. Joy because the chains were broken, terror because now what? Where do you go? How do you survive? What do you do when you've never been allowed to make decisions for yourself? Washington would later describe the scene in vivid detail. There was ecstasy among the newly freed people, singing and shouting in celebration. But as the initial joy subsided, a more somber mood took over. Mothers looked at their children and wondered how they would feed them. Old people who had spent their entire lives on the plantation wondered where they would go. The young and strong could seek work, but what about those who had no skills beyond what the plantation had demanded? This is where many people would have been paralyzed. Freedom without preparation is overwhelming. Freedom without resources is frightening. But Booker and his family made a decision that would prove crucial. They left Virginia and moved to West Virginia, where his stepfather had found work in the salt mines. The journey to West Virginia was long and difficult. The family traveled mostly on foot, carrying what few possessions they had. They slept in the open when no shelter could be found. They went hungry when food ran out. But they were moving toward a new life, and that made every hardship bearable. Now you might think that freedom meant the end of hard labor. You would be wrong. Freedom meant a different kind of hard labor, the labor of building a life from nothing. Young Booker went to work in the salt furnaces, then later in coal mines. The work was brutal. The hours were long. The conditions were dangerous. He was still just a child, but childhood as we understand it was a luxury he could not afford. The salt furnaces required workers to pack salt into barrels, backbreaking work that went on hour after hour. The coal mines were even worse. The darkness was absolute. The air was thick with dust that filled your lungs. The tunnels were narrow and the ceiling low, requiring workers to crouch for hours at a time. Cave-ins were a constant threat. Injuries were common. Deaths were not rare. But here's what set Booker apart. Even while working in the mines, even while exhausted from physical labor, he never forgot that glimpse through the schoolhouse door. He never forgot his hunger for education. He scraped together what little money he could and found someone who could teach him the basics of reading. He studied by candlelight after long days of work. He carved out time that didn't seem to exist. His first book was a simple spelling book. He treasured it like gold. He studied it whenever he had a spare moment. He practiced forming letters on any surface he could find. The other workers must have thought he was strange. This boy who wanted to read when reading couldn't fill your belly or keep you warm. But he knew something they didn't. He knew that the ability to read was the key to everything else. This is a crucial lesson for all of us. Circumstances will always provide excuses. There will always be reasons why you can't pursue your dreams. You're too tired. You're too poor. You're too busy. You don't have the right connections. But excuses don't build lives. Actions do. Booker had every excuse in the world to give up on education. Instead, he found ways to learn even when learning seemed impossible. Around this time, a significant opportunity presented itself. Booker learned that the wife of General Lewis Ruffner, the owner of the mines, needed a houseboy. Mrs. Viola Ruffner had a reputation for being extremely demanding. Previous workers had quit or been fired because they couldn't meet her standards. Most boys avoided the position, afraid of her strictness. But Booker saw opportunity where others saw only difficulty. He took the job and committed to meeting whatever standards Mrs. Ruffner set. She demanded cleanliness, and he cleaned. She demanded punctuality, and he was always on time. She demanded thoroughness, and he was thorough in everything he did. Something remarkable happened. Mrs. Ruffner recognized his quality. She saw in him a young man of exceptional character and potential. She began to encourage his education. She allowed him time to study. She became in many ways a mentor to him. The demanding woman that others avoided became one of the most important influences in his early life. This experience taught Booker a profound lesson. The very qualities that made Mrs. Ruffner difficult to work for were the qualities that allowed her to recognize his potential. Her high standards weren't cruelty, they were an opportunity to prove himself. When you exceed high expectations, you earn the respect and support of people who can help you rise. Around this time, he heard about a school for black students in Virginia called the Hampton Normal and Agricultural Institute. It was hundreds of miles away. He had almost no money. He had no way to get there. For most people, this would have been the end of the dream. But Booker was not most people. He made up his mind that he would get to Hampton no matter what it took. Think about that decision. A teenager with almost nothing, deciding to travel hundreds of miles to pursue an education that might not even accept him when he arrived. This wasn't reasonable. This wasn't practical. This was pure determination mixed with desperate hope. This was the kind of commitment that separates those who achieve their dreams from those who merely dream. He set out with a small amount of money that ran out long before he reached his destination. He worked odd jobs along the way, taking whatever employment he could find to earn enough for the next leg of the journey. He slept wherever he could find shelter. One night, he famously slept under a wooden sidewalk in the city of Richmond, Virginia, cold and hungry but unwilling to turn back. When morning came, he found himself near the docks. Ships were being unloaded, and he saw an opportunity. He asked for work and was hired to help unload cargo. The work was hard, but it gave him money for food. More importantly, it gave him a place to sleep. For several days, he continued sleeping under that sidewalk, working by day and studying by night, moving ever closer to his goal. There were moments when he could have turned back. There were moments when the whole journey seemed foolish. What was he doing? A poor black teenager trying to walk hundreds of miles to a school that might not even accept him? The voices of doubt must have been loud. But he kept moving forward, one step at a time, 1 mile at a time, one day at a time. When he finally arrived at Hampton, he was dirty, exhausted, and hungry. His clothes were worn. He had almost no money. He had no letters of recommendation, no credentials, and no guarantee of admission. He was just a ragged young man standing in front of a school, hoping for a chance. The head teacher, Mary Mackey, looked at this disheveled arrival with uncertainty. She had seen many students come through Hampton, but few had arrived in such condition. She didn't know his story. She didn't know what he had overcome to stand before her. All she saw was a young man who didn't look like he belonged, but she gave him a test. Not a written test. She handed him a broom and told him to sweep a room. Now, some people would have been offended. Some people would have seen this as beneath them. After traveling hundreds of miles, after sacrificing so much, after dreaming so long of this moment, being asked to sweep a floor, where was the dignity in that? Where was the recognition of what he had accomplished just to get there? But Booker understood something profound. Every task is an opportunity to prove your worth. Every job, no matter how small, is a chance to demonstrate your character. He didn't need to be recognized before he could show what he was capable of. He needed to show what he was capable of to earn recognition. He swept that room like it had never been swept before. He swept it 3 times. He moved every piece of furniture and cleaned in every corner. He dusted every surface until it gleamed. He didn't just complete the task. He mastered it. He turned a simple assignment into a demonstration of excellence. When Miss Mackey came back and ran her handkerchief along the walls and woodwork, she found not a single particle of dust. She looked at this young man who had traveled so far and worked so hard, and she admitted him to the school. She looked at him and said the 4 words that opened the door to his future. "I guess you will do." This moment contains one of the most important lessons in this entire story. Excellence is not about the size of the task. Excellence is about the quality of your effort. It doesn't matter if you're sweeping a floor or running a company. What matters is whether you give your absolute best to whatever is in front of you. Booker didn't just sweep that room. He swept it with everything he had. And that made all the difference. At Hampton, under the guidance of General Samuel C. Armstrong, Booker thrived. For the first time in his life, he was in an environment designed to help him learn and grow. But it wasn't easy. He had to work as a janitor to pay his way. He had to catch up on years of education he had missed. He had to prove himself constantly against students who had more preparation and more advantages. General Armstrong became a father figure to Booker, the father he had never truly had. Armstrong was a white man who had commanded black troops during the Civil War and had dedicated his life to educating former slaves. He believed in practical education, in teaching not just books and theories, but real skills that students could use to build productive lives. He believed in the dignity of labor, in the idea that working with your hands was just as honorable as working with your mind. These ideas took root in young Booker's heart. He watched how Armstrong carried himself, how he treated everyone with respect, how he worked alongside his students rather than standing above them. He absorbed not just the lessons Armstrong taught, but the way he lived. This is how character is transmitted, not just through words but through example. Hampton introduced Booker to new ways of thinking and living. He learned about hygiene, about the importance of regular bathing and clean clothes. He learned about organization, about keeping living spaces neat and orderly. He learned about punctuality, about the respect that comes from being on time and meeting obligations. These might seem like small things, but they were revolutionary for a young man who had grown up with nothing. Most importantly, he learned that education wasn't just about acquiring knowledge, it was about transformation. It was about becoming a new kind of person, one equipped to build a better life and help others do the same. This understanding would shape everything he did afterward. After graduating from Hampton, Booker spent several years teaching. He returned to his community in West Virginia and opened a school. He taught children during the day and adults at night. He saw firsthand the hunger for education among people who had been denied it for so long. He saw former enslaved people in their 60s and 70s learning to read for the first time, their eyes lighting up as words on a page finally made sense. These experiences convinced him that education was the key to uplifting his entire race. He also returned to Hampton for further study and to work as a teacher himself. He took on challenging assignments, including working with Native American students who had been brought to Hampton. This experience expanded his understanding of education and its power to transform lives across different cultures and backgrounds. Then came the opportunity that would define his life. In 1881, General Armstrong received a letter from a group of people in Tuskegee, Alabama. They wanted to start a school for black students and were looking for someone to lead it. The Alabama legislature had appropriated a small sum for teachers' salaries, and local citizens had raised additional funds. But there was no campus, no buildings, nothing but an idea and a need. Armstrong recommended his former student Booker, now using the name Booker T. Washington. It was a tremendous vote of confidence, sending a young man barely out of school to build an institution from nothing. But Armstrong had seen something in Washington, a combination of intelligence, determination, and practical wisdom that suited him perfectly for the task. When Washington arrived in Tuskegee, he found almost nothing. The area was rural, the community was poor, and the resources were minimal. There was no campus. There were no buildings. There was no money beyond the small appropriation for salaries. There was just an idea and a burning need. Most people would have looked at this situation and seen impossibility. Washington looked at it and saw opportunity. He began by getting to know the community. He traveled throughout the surrounding area, visiting homes, talking to families, understanding their needs and their hopes. He saw poverty that shocked him. He saw former slaves still living in conditions barely better than slavery. He saw a need for practical education that would help people improve their daily lives. He started the school on July 4, 1881, in a rundown church and a small shanty. The church had a leaky roof that required an umbrella on rainy days. The shanty was barely fit for habitation. His first class consisted of 30 students, many of them already working as teachers themselves who wanted to improve their skills. From these humble beginnings, Washington began to build. He and his students literally constructed the institution from the ground up. When they needed bricks, they learned to make bricks. When they needed buildings, they learned to build. When they needed furniture, they learned carpentry. When they needed food, they learned farming. This wasn't just about saving money, although that was part of it. This was about teaching a fundamental truth. You don't wait for someone to give you what you need. You build it yourself. You create value. You develop skills. You prove your worth through the quality of your work. The brick-making process became famous. Early attempts failed. The bricks crumbled and broke. But Washington and his students persisted. They experimented. They learned from their failures. They adjusted their techniques. Eventually, they succeeded in producing high-quality bricks that were used not only for Tuskegee, but were sold throughout the region. This story of the bricks contains a powerful metaphor. Every worthy goal will involve failed attempts. Every meaningful achievement will require persistence through disappointment. The bricks that crumbled weren't failures, they were lessons. The kilns that collapsed weren't disasters, they were teachers. Success came not from avoiding failure, but from learning from it and refusing to quit. The Tuskegee Institute grew year by year. More students came, more buildings went up, more programs were developed. Washington's vision was practical education, teaching young men and women skills they could use immediately to improve their lives and their communities. He taught farming techniques that would help people get more from their land. The local farmers were growing cotton, often poorly, and struggling to survive. Washington brought in agricultural experts to teach better methods. He introduced new crops that would diversify farming and protect against the failure of any single crop. He showed farmers how to improve their soil, increase their yields, and make better use of their resources. He taught trades like carpentry, masonry, and blacksmithing. These skills were in demand throughout the region. Graduates of Tuskegee could find work immediately, earning good wages and building stable lives. More importantly, they could start their own businesses, becoming entrepreneurs rather than merely employees. He taught domestic skills like cooking, sewing, and home management. These might seem less prestigious than other subjects, but Washington understood that transforming homes was essential to transforming communities. When families ate better food, kept cleaner homes, and managed their resources more wisely, their entire quality of life improved. He taught business principles. He believed that economic independence was the foundation of true freedom. When you can earn your own living, when you own your own property, when you can provide for your family through your own efforts, you have a freedom that no one can take away. He trained his students not just to work for others, but to become owners and employers themselves. This philosophy wasn't without controversy, even at the time. Some believed that Black Americans should be fighting for full political and social equality right away. They felt that focusing on practical skills was settling for less than they deserved. They worried that accepting economic roles meant accepting second-class citizenship. But Washington had a different perspective. He believed that you build credibility through achievement. He believed that proving your value through productive work would eventually earn respect and opportunity. He believed that trying to force change before laying the groundwork would lead to backlash and failure. He often used a powerful metaphor. He compared Black Americans to a ship lost at sea, surrounded by water but dying of thirst. A passing vessel received their desperate signal and responded with advice that seemed strange. Cast down your bucket where you are. The ship's captain was confused. How could he find fresh water in the middle of the ocean? But when he finally cast down his bucket, he pulled up fresh water. Unknown to him, he had drifted into the mouth of a great river, and the sea around him, though seemingly salt water, was actually fresh. Washington applied this metaphor to his community. Don't look far away for salvation. Don't wait for distant solutions. Cast down your bucket where you are. Find opportunity in your current circumstances. Build on what you have. Make yourself indispensable through skill and service. The water of opportunity might be right beneath you, even if it doesn't look that way at first. Whether you agree with his approach or not, you cannot deny its impact. Tuskegee grew into a major institution. Thousands of students passed through its doors and went on to improve their communities. The ideas Washington championed influenced education and economic development for generations. Let's pause here and talk about what makes Washington's story so relevant to your life today. You might not be facing the challenges he faced. You probably weren't born into slavery. You probably have access to education that he had to fight for. But the principles that guided his life are timeless. First, there's the principle of starting where you are. Washington didn't wait for perfect conditions. He didn't wait until he had enough money or enough support or enough resources. He started with what he had and built from there. How many of us are waiting for the perfect moment to pursue our dreams? How many of us are using lack of resources as an excuse for inaction? Washington teaches us that the perfect moment is now, and the resources you need often appear only after you begin. Second, there's the principle of excellence in everything. Remember that broom? Washington applied that same standard to everything he did. At Tuskegee, he insisted on the highest standards. Buildings had to be well constructed, crops had to be well tended, students had to present themselves with dignity and professionalism. He understood that your work speaks for you. Your work tells the world who you are. When you do excellent work, you don't have to demand respect, you earn it. Third, there's the principle of practical progress. Washington was a realist. He understood that lasting change takes time. He understood that you can't skip steps. He focused on what could be accomplished today while working toward larger goals for tomorrow. In our age of instant gratification, this patience seems almost foreign. We want change now. We want success now. We want results now. But real achievement is built brick by brick, just like Tuskegee was built brick by brick. Fourth, there's the principle of service to others. Washington didn't pursue success for himself alone. Everything he did was aimed at uplifting others. He trained teachers who would go on to train more teachers. He educated farmers who would go on to improve their communities. He created a ripple effect of positive change that extended far beyond anything he could have accomplished alone. True success isn't just about what you achieve, it's about what you enable others to achieve. Now let's return to Washington's journey. As Tuskegee grew, so did his reputation. He became a sought-after speaker, traveling across the country to share his vision and raise support for his school. He had a gift for communication, an ability to make complex ideas simple and to move audiences with his sincerity and passion. But it was one speech in particular that would catapult him to national prominence. In 1895, Washington was invited to speak at the Cotton States and International Exposition in Atlanta. This was a major event, and he would be speaking to a predominantly white audience in the Deep South, just 30 years after the end of the Civil War. The tensions were real, the stakes were high. One wrong word could set back everything he had worked for. Washington knew he had to be strategic. He had to speak truth while navigating the reality of his time. He had to inspire without threatening. He had to advocate for his people while not alienating potential allies. It was a tightrope walk of the highest order. The night before the speech, he barely slept. The weight of the moment pressed upon him. He knew that what he said would be scrutinized by millions. He knew that he was representing not just himself, not just Tuskegee, but an entire race of people who had been denied a voice for so long. When he stepped to the podium, he faced an audience of thousands. The silence was heavy with expectation. What would this black man say to this predominantly white audience? What message would he bring? The speech he gave that day became one of the most famous addresses in American history. He used powerful imagery to make his points. He spoke of casting down your bucket where you are, using the metaphor to encourage both black and white Southerners to work together, to find common ground, to build a prosperous future together through cooperation rather than conflict. He addressed both races directly. To black Americans, he said to cast down their buckets in agriculture, mechanics, commerce, and domestic service. He urged them to dignify common labor and to prove their worth through excellence. To white Americans, he pointed out that they were surrounded by people who had proven their loyalty through generations and urged them to give these people opportunity. He made a gesture that became iconic. Holding up his hand with fingers spread, he said that in all things purely social, the races could be as separate as the fingers. But then he closed his hand into a fist and said that in all things essential to mutual progress, they could be as one as the hand. Washington argued that economic progress was the pathway to everything else. He suggested that black Americans should focus on becoming indispensable through skill and productivity, proving their value in practical ways. He downplayed political agitation and social equality in favor of economic development and practical achievement. This message resonated with white audiences who were looking for a way forward that didn't challenge them too directly. It also resonated with many black Americans who saw practical wisdom in his approach. The audience exploded in applause. White listeners rushed to shake his hand. Newspapers across the country praised his words. The speech made Washington a national figure overnight. He became the most prominent black leader in America, consulted by politicians, industrialists, and presidents. Theodore Roosevelt invited him to dine at the White House, the first black American to receive such an invitation, a gesture that caused controversy but demonstrated Washington's unique position. This success didn't come without criticism from within his own community. Leaders like Webb Du Bois argued that Washington was too accommodating, that he was willing to accept second-class citizenship in exchange for economic opportunity. Du Bois believed in fighting for full political and civil rights immediately, in demanding equality rather than earning it. This debate between Washington's approach and more confrontational strategies for change would continue for years and still echoes today. But Washington had his reasons. He had seen what happened when change was pushed too fast without the foundation to support it. He had seen the violence and backlash that could follow. He lived in the South during a time when lynching was common and black Americans faced constant physical danger. He believed in building strength from the ground up, creating a base of economic independence and practical achievement that would eventually make equality undeniable. Was he right? Was he wrong? History continues to debate these questions. What cannot be debated is his impact. Tuskegee Institute trained generations of leaders. His philosophy of practical education influenced schools across the country and around the world. His emphasis on self-help and economic development continues to resonate in communities today. Let's talk about some of the personal qualities that made Washington so effective. First, he was relentlessly optimistic. Despite everything he had experienced, despite the obstacles he faced every day, he maintained a belief that progress was possible. This wasn't naive optimism that ignored reality. This was determined optimism that refused to be defeated by reality. He acknowledged problems but focused on solutions. He recognized barriers but looked for ways around them. Second, he was humble. Despite his fame, despite his influence, he remained focused on the work rather than on himself. He didn't build monuments to his own ego. He built institutions that would outlast him. He trained leaders who would carry on after he was gone. His legacy was designed to multiply, not to magnify himself. Third, he was persistent. There were countless setbacks along the way. Funding fell through, buildings burned down, critics attacked him from all sides, but he kept going. He didn't let temporary defeats become permanent failures. He adapted, adjusted, and moved forward. Fourth, he understood people. Washington was a master of human relations. He knew how to make people feel valued. He knew how to find common ground with those who disagreed with him. He knew how to inspire and motivate others to join his cause. This wasn't manipulation. This was genuine appreciation for the humanity in everyone he encountered. Fifth, he was a learner. Even after achieving tremendous success, he never stopped growing. He read constantly. He sought out new ideas. He was willing to change his mind when evidence warranted it. He understood that the moment you think you know everything is the moment you stop improving. Sixth, he was disciplined. Washington rose early and worked late. He managed his time with precision. He kept detailed records and followed up on commitments. The same discipline that made him sweep that room so thoroughly carried through to everything he did. Seventh, he was grateful. Despite everything he had endured, Washington maintained a spirit of gratitude. He appreciated those who helped him. He acknowledged the opportunities he had been given. He never became bitter about the past, but remained focused on the possibilities of the future. These qualities didn't develop overnight. They were forged through years of challenge and struggle. They were refined through countless experiences of failure and success. They grew from that boy on the dirt floor into the man who would shape a nation. Now let's look at some specific lessons from Washington's life that you can apply to your own journey. Lesson 1. Start before you're ready. Washington didn't wait until he had everything figured out before beginning. He started Tuskegee with almost nothing. He started his journey to Hampton with almost nothing. He consistently took action before conditions were perfect. Most people never begin because they're waiting for the right moment. The right moment comes when you make it come. Lesson 2. Use whatever you have. Washington made bricks. He cleared land. He built buildings with his own hands and the hands of his students. He didn't complain about what he lacked. He maximized what he had. What do you have right now that you're not using? What resources are sitting idle while you wish for different resources? The beginning of progress is using what you already possess. Lesson 3. Education is liberation. Washington understood that knowledge is power in the truest sense. Not power over others, but power over your own life. The ability to read, to think, to analyze, to create. These are the tools that allow you to shape your destiny. Never stop learning. Never stop growing. The investment you make in your own mind pays dividends forever. Lesson 4. Dignity is found in all honest work. Washington rejected the idea that some work is beneath you. He found meaning in sweeping floors, in making bricks, in farming, in every productive task. This attitude transforms how you experience your daily life. When you bring excellence and dignity to whatever you do, you transform not just the work, but yourself. Lesson 5. Character matters more than circumstance. Washington was born into the worst possible circumstances. He had every excuse to fail. But he built a character that transcended his circumstances. Your character is something you control. Your response to challenges is something you control. Your attitude is something you control. These things matter far more than the hand you were dealt. Lesson 6. Think long term. Washington played the long game. He was building for generations, not just for himself. He made decisions based on what would create lasting change, not what would give immediate satisfaction. In a world obsessed with instant results, this kind of patience is rare and powerful. Lesson 7. Lift as you climb. Washington's success was always tied to helping others succeed. He didn't climb the ladder and then pull it up behind him. He built escalators for others to rise. The most meaningful success is success that multiplies, that creates opportunities for others, that leaves the world better than you found it. Lesson 8. Action speaks louder than complaints. Washington lived in an unjust world. He had every right to complain about the unfairness of his situation. But he chose action over complaint. He chose building over criticizing. He chose proving his worth through achievement rather than demanding recognition he hadn't yet earned. This doesn't mean injustice should be accepted, but it does mean that progress comes through doing, not just saying. Lesson 9. Relationships matter. Washington built a vast network of supporters, donors, educators, and community leaders. He understood that no one achieves great things alone. He invested in relationships. He showed appreciation to those who helped him. He built bridges rather than burning them. Your network is one of your greatest assets. Build it with care and tend it with gratitude. Lesson 10. Stay true to your mission. Despite all the criticism, despite all the pressure to change, Washington stayed focused on what he believed would create real progress. He was willing to adapt tactics, but not to abandon principles. Know what you stand for and stand for it even when it's difficult. Let's take a moment to reflect on the broader significance of Washington's story. He lived during one of the most challenging periods in American history for Black Americans. The end of slavery had not ended prejudice. The promise of equality remained unfulfilled. Violence, discrimination, and poverty were daily realities for millions. In this context, Washington's achievements were remarkable. He built an institution that educated thousands. He created a model of practical education that influenced schools worldwide. He demonstrated what was possible through determination, intelligence, and hard work. He gave hope to people who had been told they had no future. But his story is not just about race or about a particular moment in history. His story is about the human capacity to rise above circumstances. It's about the power of education to transform lives. It's about the importance of character and persistence. It's about building rather than waiting, about doing rather than merely dreaming. These are universal lessons. They apply whether you're Black or white, rich or poor, American or from anywhere else in the world. They apply whether you're starting a business or pursuing an education, raising a family or building a career. They apply because they tap into fundamental truths about how progress happens and how lives are transformed. Washington faced obstacles that most of us will never face. He started from a place that most of us will never experience, and yet he built a legacy that continues to inspire. If he could do what he did with what he had, what's stopping you from doing what you dream with what you have? Now, I want to share with you some of the wisdom that Washington accumulated over his remarkable life. These are insights that guided his actions and shaped his success. On the value of work, Washington believed that there was no shame in any honest labor. He had dug in mines, cleaned buildings, and made bricks. He knew firsthand that all work has dignity when done with excellence. He taught his students not just to work but to love work, to see it as an opportunity rather than a burden. He once said that the individual who can do something that the world wants done will, in the end, make his way regardless of his race. This philosophy transformed how his students viewed themselves and their potential. On the importance of service, Washington measured success not by what he accumulated, but by what he contributed. He lived modestly despite his fame. He poured his energy into building institutions rather than building personal wealth. He understood that true fulfillment comes from serving something larger than yourself. Every decision he made was filtered through one question: how will this help others rise? On dealing with criticism, Washington faced critics from all directions throughout his career. Some thought he was too accommodating, others thought he was too ambitious. He learned to listen to criticism thoughtfully without being paralyzed by it. He adjusted when criticism had merit and stood firm when he believed he was right. He didn't let critics distract him from his mission. He understood that anyone doing significant work will face opposition, and that opposition is often a sign you're making an impact. On patience and persistence, Washington knew that real change takes time. He planted seeds that wouldn't bear fruit for years or even decades. He was content to work steadily toward goals that he might not live to see fully realized. This long-term perspective gave him resilience when progress seemed slow. When critics complained about how long his methods would take, he reminded them that shortcuts often lead nowhere, while patient building creates foundations that last. On the power of example, Washington believed that actions speak louder than arguments. He didn't just talk about what Black Americans could achieve, he demonstrated it. He built Tuskegee as a living example of his philosophy. He knew that one successful life could do more to change minds than 1,000 speeches. When people saw Tuskegee graduates building successful businesses, buying property, and lifting their communities, the evidence spoke for itself. On maintaining hope, despite all the injustice he witnessed, despite all the setbacks he experienced, Washington never lost hope for a better future. He believed in progress. He believed in the possibility of change. This hope wasn't passive waiting for things to get better. It was active hope that motivated action and sustained effort. He knew that hopelessness is a prison that keeps you from even trying, while hope is the fuel that keeps you moving forward. On the relationship between races, Washington sought cooperation rather than confrontation. He believed that the interests of Black and white Americans were ultimately aligned, that what helped one would help all. He worked to build bridges and find common ground. Whether or not you agree with his approach, his emphasis on finding ways to work together rather than apart contains wisdom for any divided society. On education, Washington saw education as the master key that unlocks all other doors. But he believed education should be practical, connected to real life and real needs. He wanted his students to be able to use what they learned immediately to improve their lives and communities. Education for its own sake wasn't enough. Education must lead to action. He believed in training both the hand and the head, preparing students to think clearly and work skillfully. On self-reliance, Washington preached and practiced self-reliance. He believed that waiting for others to solve your problems was a recipe for disappointment. He urged his students and his community to take responsibility for their own progress. This didn't mean ignoring injustice or refusing help. It meant taking initiative rather than remaining passive. It meant being the author of your own story rather than waiting for someone else to write it for you. On the accumulation of property, Washington saw property ownership as a key to independence and stability. When you own land, when you own a business, when you have savings, you have a foundation that gives you options. He encouraged his students to be economically productive, to save and invest, to build wealth that would give them freedom. He taught that economic independence was the basis for all other forms of independence. Let me tell you about some of the people Washington influenced and the ripple effects of his work. George Washington Carver was one of the most famous scientists to emerge from Tuskegee. Washington recruited him in 1896, and Carver went on to revolutionize Southern agriculture with his research on peanuts, sweet potatoes, and soil conservation. Carver discovered hundreds of uses for crops that had previously been considered minor. He taught farmers how to enrich their soil naturally. His work helped farmers break free from dependence on cotton and build more sustainable livelihoods. This is what Washington's vision looked like in practice. Education leading to practical innovation that lifted entire communities. Thousands of teachers trained at Tuskegee went on to start schools across the South. They carried Washington's philosophy of practical education into communities that had few other resources. They became multipliers of his vision, extending his impact far beyond what he could have achieved alone. In rural areas where no schools existed, these teachers opened small institutions in churches, homes, or wherever space could be found. They taught reading and writing alongside practical skills. They transformed communities, one student at a time. The buildings that Washington and his students constructed still stand as monuments to their skill and determination. They weren't just making bricks. They were proving what they could accomplish. They were creating tangible evidence that challenged the prejudices of their time. When visitors came to Tuskegee and saw the quality of the construction, saw the orderly campus, saw the productive workshops and farms, they saw evidence that couldn't be argued away. The agricultural extension programs that Tuskegee developed brought modern farming techniques to rural communities. Mobile schools traveled to areas where farmers couldn't come to campus. This innovation in outreach education influenced programs worldwide and demonstrated Washington's commitment to meeting people where they were. The Tuskegee extension workers didn't wait for farmers to come to them. They went to the farms, demonstrating new techniques, answering questions, and helping families improve their productivity. Washington's approach to fundraising was also revolutionary. He cultivated relationships with wealthy donors like Andrew Carnegie and John D. Rockefeller. He persuaded them that investing in Tuskegee was investing in the future of the nation. His ability to build these relationships across racial and social lines showed his extraordinary interpersonal skills and his talent for finding common ground. He never begged. He presented opportunities. He showed donors how their support would create lasting change, and they responded generously. The annual Tuskegee Negro Conference that Washington established brought together educators, farmers, ministers, and leaders from across the South. These gatherings became forums for sharing best practices, discussing challenges, and building solidarity. People who had felt isolated in their work found community. Solutions developed at Tuskegee spread to other regions. The conference model was copied by other institutions. Washington also worked tirelessly to improve conditions beyond Tuskegee. He advocated for better schools throughout Alabama and the South. He worked to protect voting rights even as they were being systematically stripped away. He quietly funded legal challenges to discriminatory laws. While his public persona emphasized accommodation, behind the scenes he was working for change through whatever channels were available. His autobiography, Up From Slavery, published in 1901, became a bestseller and introduced his story to millions. The book was translated into multiple languages and read around the world. It inspired people far beyond America's shores. His story showed that human potential exists everywhere, waiting only for opportunity and determination to unlock it. Washington's influence reached the highest levels of American society. Presidents sought his advice on appointments and policies. Business leaders consulted on economic development. Educators looked to Tuskegee as a model. He used this influence strategically, always working to open doors for others, to create opportunities, to advance his vision of progress through practical achievement. But Washington never forgot where he came from. He remembered the dirt floor. He remembered the hunger. He remembered the darkness of the coal mines. These memories kept him humble and kept him focused on serving those who were still struggling. He never became so comfortable that he lost sight of the mission. He never became so successful that he forgot the people he was working to uplift. Now, as we approach the end of this journey through Washington's life and wisdom, let me share some final thoughts about what his story means for you today. The world has changed enormously since Washington's time. The specific challenges he faced are not the challenges you face. Slavery is abolished. Legal segregation is ended. Opportunities that were denied to him are available to you. But the deeper lessons remain relevant. You will face obstacles. Washington shows that obstacles can be overcome through persistence, creativity, and hard work. The size of your obstacle matters less than the size of your determination. When you commit fully to a goal, when you refuse to accept defeat, when you adapt and persist, you develop capabilities you didn't know you had. You may start with very little. Washington shows that humble beginnings don't determine final destinations. What matters is what you do with what you have and how you grow from where you start. The poorest person with determination can outachieve the richest person without it. Your starting point is just that, a starting point. Your trajectory is what matters. You will need education. Washington shows that learning is the foundation of progress. Invest in your own development continuously. Never stop growing your skills and knowledge. Education isn't just formal schooling, it's the commitment to understanding more today than you did yesterday. It's the willingness to learn from every experience. It's the hunger to keep expanding your capabilities. You will need character. Washington shows that how you do things matters as much as what you do. Excellence, integrity, persistence, humility. These qualities will serve you in any endeavor. Character is built through the small choices you make every day. It's built through keeping promises even when no one is watching. It's built through doing your best even when the task seems insignificant. Character compounds over time, becoming your most valuable asset. You will need patience. Washington shows that meaningful achievements take time. Plant seeds today that will bear fruit tomorrow. Think in terms of years and decades, not just days and weeks. The culture around you might celebrate overnight success, but real achievement is usually the result of years of unglamorous work. Be willing to do the work that no one sees to achieve the results everyone admires. You will need to serve others. Washington shows that the most fulfilling success is success that helps others succeed. Find ways to lift others as you climb. Build legacies that multiply beyond yourself. The greatest joy in achievement comes not from what you gain, but from what you enable. When your success creates opportunities for others, you've achieved something truly meaningful. You will need hope. Washington shows that even in the darkest circumstances, hope is possible and necessary. Hope is not naive optimism. Hope is the conviction that your efforts matter, that progress is possible, that the future can be better than the past. Hope is what keeps you trying when logic says to quit. Hope is what allows you to see possibilities where others see only problems. Booker T. Washington's life was a testament to the power of the human spirit. Born into slavery, denied every advantage, facing obstacles that would have crushed most people, he rose, he built, he inspired, he left the world better than he found it. He took a life that began with absolutely nothing and created something that still echoes more than a century later. His story asks you a question. What will you do with your life? What will you build? What obstacles will you overcome? What legacy will you leave? You have advantages Washington never had. You have access to education he had to fight for. You have freedoms he could only dream of. You have resources and technologies that didn't exist in his time. The question is not whether you can achieve great things. The question is whether you will choose to pursue them. Will you start before you're ready? Will you use what you have? Will you persist when things get hard? Will you maintain your character when shortcuts tempt you? Will you serve others as you succeed? Will you keep learning and growing? Will you think long-term and build for the future? Washington's life answers these questions with a resounding yes. His example calls you to answer them too. Your circumstances are different from his. Your path will be your own. But the principles that guided him can guide you. Start where you are. Use what you have. Do what you can. Never stop learning. Never stop growing. Never give up. The boy on the dirt floor became a man who dined with presidents. The child who couldn't read became a voice that shaped a nation. The person who started with nothing built something that outlasted him. He proved that no beginning is too humble, no obstacle too great, and no dream too large. He showed that one person committed to excellence and service can change the world. What will you build? What will be your answer to Washington's example? What story will your life tell? The choice is yours. The power is yours. The future is waiting. Everything you need to begin is already within you. The question is whether you'll summon the courage to start, the persistence to continue, and the character to see it through. Washington's journey from slavery to national leadership seems impossible, but it happened. It happened because one person refused to accept the limitations others tried to place on him. It happened because one person committed to excellence in everything he touched. It happened because one person believed that progress was possible and dedicated his life to making it real. You have that same potential. You have that same power. You have the ability to transform not just your own life, but the lives of countless others. The question is what you'll do with it. Will you let your circumstances define you, or will you rise above them? Will you accept mediocrity, or will you pursue excellence? Will you wait for someone to give you opportunities, or will you create them? Washington would tell you to start now. Start with what you have. Start where you are. Don't wait for perfect conditions. Don't wait until you feel ready. Don't wait for permission. Just begin. Take that first step. Sweep that floor with excellence. Make those first bricks even if they crumble. Learn from your failures. Adjust and try again. Keep moving forward. He would tell you to find meaning in your work, whatever it is. Bring dignity to it. Do it with excellence. Let your work speak for you. Build a reputation for quality, for reliability, for going beyond what's required. This is how you create opportunities for yourself. This is how you build a future. He would tell you to invest in education. Read everything you can. Learn new skills. Develop your mind. The knowledge you gain cannot be taken from you. It travels with you wherever you go. It opens doors that would otherwise remain closed. Make yourself more valuable by making yourself more capable. He would tell you to serve others. Look for ways to help people rise. Share what you know. Create opportunities for those coming behind you. The most meaningful life is one that multiplies, that creates positive change beyond itself. Don't climb alone. Bring others with you. He would tell you to be patient but persistent. Understand that real achievement takes time. Don't be discouraged by slow progress. Keep working, keep building, keep moving forward. The bricks you lay today are creating the foundation for tomorrow's success. He would tell you that character is everything. Your reputation is built through consistent action over time. Be known for keeping your word. Be known for doing excellent work. Be known for treating people well. These things matter more than talent or connections or luck. Most of all, he would tell you to believe. Believe that progress is possible. Believe that your efforts matter. Believe that you can rise above where you started. Believe that the obstacles in your path can be overcome. This belief isn't delusion. It's the fuel that powers achievement. Without it, you won't even try. With it, you become unstoppable. Now, I want to thank you for spending this time with me today, diving deep into the remarkable life of Booker T. Washington. If this story has inspired you, if these lessons have given you something to think about, if you're feeling motivated to pursue your own dreams with renewed determination, I'd ask you to do something simple. Hit that subscribe button right now and tap the notification bell so you don't miss future content from Audiobook Gist. We bring you the wisdom of the world's greatest books, the stories that inspire, the lessons that transform lives. Take a moment to give this video a like because it helps more people discover these powerful stories. Your like tells the algorithm that this content matters, that these lessons are worth sharing. And if you know someone who needs to hear this message, share it with them. Send them the link. Tell them about Washington's journey. Sometimes the right story at the right moment can change a life. Maybe this is that story for someone you know. Drop a comment below and tell me what resonated with you most. Was it the story of the broom, the making of the bricks, the long walk to Hampton, the building of Tuskegee? Which lesson will you apply to your own life? I read every comment, and I'd love to hear how this story has inspired you. Remember, Booker T. Washington started with nothing but a dream and a determination to learn. He slept on a dirt floor. He worked in coal mines. He walked hundreds of miles just for the chance to study. Look what he accomplished. You're starting with more than he had. You have access to information he couldn't imagine. You have opportunities he fought to create. Imagine what you could accomplish if you brought even a fraction of his determination to your own goals. This has been Audiobook Gist. bringing you the wisdom of the world's greatest books distilled into powerful, actionable lessons. We're here to inspire you, to challenge you, to remind you of what's possible when you commit to excellence and service. Until next time, remember the lessons of this remarkable man.